You're tuned into the hottest paranormal life show on YouTube, Into the Fringe, where we discuss lost civilizations, UFOs, cryptids, unsolved mysteries, megalithic structures, extraterrestrials, interdimensional portals, time skips, and more. Don't change that channel, because now you are leaving the mainstream and entering into the fringe.
Greetings, followers. It is I, Cardinal Sin, and welcome to another episode of Into the Fringe. And tonight's guest is Charles Lear. But before we make the introductions, you see I have my Modoc Tiki mug here. So we're going to go ahead and fill up so that we can get a well-hydrated session here. And I'm putting in half Rockstar Punch and half Canada Dry Ginger Ale. And it filled right up. So let's see how they taste together. That's tasty. So I will read you Charles's bio. Charles Lear has many interests, of which UFOs take up more than a little of his time. His main interests in the UFO subject are in the documented history the phenomenon has spawned and the people who investigate it, as this book reflects. Charles's other interests are geology and paleontology, and his familiarity with science and its disciplines informs his approach to the UFO subject. Having lived most of his life in New York City, where he made his living as a union stagehand and was involved in other aspects of theater as a playwright, producer, director, and Shakespearean actor, Charles now resides in New York. Welcome, Charles Lear, to Into the Fringe.
Hi, well, good to be here, Cardinal.
Very good to have you. Very good to have you. And I just wanted to remind folks right off the bat that tonight, at the end of our show, we will be giving away a copy of your new book, which is The Flying Saucer Investigators from Flying Disc Press. So that's very exciting, and thank you very much. It's very generous of you. We have a weekly winner, and I'm sure after our conversation, people will be very interested to buy a copy of your book. Let's say hello to some folks in the chat. Don McDouglas is here. Dedek McManus is here. Good evening. Philip Blair is here. Hail. Rui is here. Skogli Jotun is here. Tessa D777 is here, and she says, I watched The Whisperer in Darkness today. And Ari is here and says, greetings, sinners. Space Monk is here. Darius Munchausen is in the house. Hail. Cosmic Squirrel is here. Hail from the cosmos. And hail Cardinal Sin. Well, thank you, Philip. So let's go ahead and just jump right in. I would like to, again, at the beginning of the show, let folks know, please do subscribe. It is important, and it means a lot to a little channel like mine. And please hit the notification bell so you know when I go live. and tell your friends that might enjoy the programming on the Cardinal Sin channel, or even people you hate. I don't care. You can also get your Cardinal Sin and Into the Fringe merch at gillstore.com. So that's me done pitching my stuff. Let's go ahead and jump right into asking Charles about his new book. Oh, there's my ride.
Yep. Yeah, I live right next to the Brooklyn Queens Expressway, so it's going to do what it's going to do.
Yep, that's fine. I thought that I turned my phone off. Evidently I didn't. I've been to enough UFO conferences to know that sometimes the people at them are stranger than the subjects being discussed. Did you find that that was the same with flying saucer investigators, Charles?
Oh, they're a fun bunch. They range from the serious to the. I actually in the intro said they range from the serious to the libertine mischief makers.
Indeed.
And there are some wonderful whack jobs out there too, and always have been.
Oh yeah. I used to put on UFO lectures here in Lawrence, Kansas, home of the Jayhawks.
Yeah, and William Burroughs.
I was a friend of William's, actually.
Oh, very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. And got to cook Christmas dinner for him one year.
Wow.
Yeah. I grew up in a Jewish household, so it was easy for me to spell his regular cook. Lawrence Martin is here. Hello.
Hello, Lawrence.
And there's lots of hails and hellos going on. So, two books that really captured my interest early in my life in this phenomenon were Flying Saucers Serious Business by Frank Edwards
Mm-hmm.
and Incident at Exeter by John Fuller. Then, reading his book about the Betty and Barney Hill abduction, The Interrupted Journey, pretty much cemented my interest in the topic. What were some of the first books that got you interested in UFOs?
Well, I think I was born interested. I'm born interested in everything paranormal. The first book I remember reading was The Bermuda Triangle by Charles Berlitz.
Mm-hmm.
I read a bunch. I'd say The Mothman Prophecies by John Keel. That book has stuck with me. I've read that book over and over and over again before figuring out what makes it so odd. It's a very odd book. But for most of my interest, when you could get documentaries on VHS, that's when I watched every documentary out there. Everything. I had a great video store, so they had just every UFO documentary you could think of. So I consumed a lot of those.
Do you remember the UFO documentary from the 70s that Rod Serling narrated?
Yes, UFOs, It Has Begun. Also went through life as UFOs, Past, Present, Future.
Yeah.
It's got a
that
great...
thing scared the shit out of me.
Well, do you know the story about it?
Not because of Rod Serling, because I loved Rod Serling even back then.
Mm-hmm.
But the cases and the things that he talked about when I was a young child just were very scary. No, please tell us the story.
Okay. Robert Emenegger was one of the producers. The other producer, I forget, I think Sandler was the name of the other producer. In any case, they were wanted to do a documentary on modern Army technology, military technology. Mm-hmm. So they arranged a meeting. They're at a base, and they're looking at a bunch of things, like dogs being trained for reconnaissance, et cetera, et cetera. And one guy said, "Hey, are you interested in UFOs at all?" And he said, "Not really." Well, we've got some footage of a UFO landing at Holloman Air Force Base.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be interested in that? And I said, well, yes. So they got full access to the Pentagon. They said they'd never had this sign in. They presume it's for plausible deniability.
That seems unlikely.
Now, if you look at the documentary, you'll note that the Air Force, the Department of Defense cooperated, primarily the Air Force. Spokesman William Coleman leads them around the inner ring of the Pentagon and describes the Air Force investigation, talks about the Thomas Mantell case and other things. Former Project Blue Book head Robert Friend talks about an episode where a woman was channeling aliens. Two people from the I think it was the CIA, no, Naval Intelligence, looked into this. One of them ended up channeling aliens himself. They demonstrated for somebody it turned out to be the Department of Photographic Studies, or a photographic lab. And that's rain in the background, by the way. Anyway, that's like and also that there were they made a UFO appear. So this is Robert Friend, a former Tuskegee Airman and head of Project Blue Book. That story I actually looked into. It's really shaky, and it's a funny story in itself where that came from.
Do tell, please.
This is a rabbit hole.
That's okay. That's why we're called Into the Fringe.
Yeah, there was a woman up in Canada, I believe, I think it was Canada or really close, who was channeling it. Basically, she was channeling aliens. She talked to her neighbor was I want to say something like a major general with naval intelligence and he said, "Hey, you should check this out." And he was into that kind of stuff. And she was channeling a guy named Afa, and one of these Galactic Federation things. So that whole story, the way Robert Friend tells it, it's like it sounds like it's true when you really look into it. You see all the shaky stuff, and one of the guys, the CIA guy that was. Sorry, I think it was Naval Intelligence. Guy that was
it's
channeling
all Naval Intelligence when it
the
comes
guy
down
that was
to
channeling the alien. It turned out he seemed to have some issues, mental issues. But anyway, back to UFOs. It has begun. So they're making this movie at the very last minute. They pulled the footage, said you're not able to use it, and the reasoning was they offered the footage because they wanted to present a better have the public trust the Department of Defense again after Vietnam. But then Watergate came down the pike, and they thought it was not a good time to release the video, so they pulled the video, and they ended up having to do a illustrated sequence at the very end of it, the movie. So that's that story. And what's funny is Robert Emenager showed up in UFOs, UFO cover-up ? Live,
right?
Which most people believe Richard Doty, disinformation agent, was in shadow as a
member of the aviary.
Yes, talking about having an alien that liked Tibetan music and strawberry ice cream,
which they put in at the very end of the show after Larry King had said goodnight.
Yeah,
they said, by the way, the aliens like strawberry ice cream. Right. I remember it like it was yesterday.
Cool. So Emenager's on that show as well, and he tells the story. And William Coleman is there too, Colonel William Coleman, Pentagon Air Force spokesman. So looking into Emmenegger. Emmenegger also, he comes off like, he was a serious guy. He worked for an ad agency for Nixon. Nixon asked his advice on picking his cabinet, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, what he never mentions is that he was also producer of Lancelot Link's Secret Chimp and a lot of B grade science fiction films that are just like really B grade.
Yeah.
So in terms of presenting himself as this, serious insider, his life doesn't seem to have been so serious. But the stories about Lancelot Link Secret Chimp that he tells are awesome. Apparently the chimps had a really good time during that show.
Very entertaining, if nothing else.
Yeah, and they weren't abused, so that was good to hear.
That's good. Yeah.
And he also met Lance, because those chimps live for a super long time. So I think he met Lance about 30 years later, and Lancelot he was like happy as a chimp in bananas.
Right. Happy as a chimp could be. That's very cool.
But I love that documentary. The synth music is wonderful. That's what I love about 70s.
I think that's why it spooked me out so much was the music, to be honest.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, like I said, I was familiar already with the Twilight Zone and stuff like that, and I've been able to do a Rod Serling impersonation since I was 12.
Oh, right on.
Not a very good one these days because I haven't really practiced, but submitted for your approval.
Yeah, you're
Which
getting
investigators do you primarily follow in the book?
Oh, okay. No, you asked me a question there sneakily. So, which investigators do I follow?
Primarily, yeah.
Oh. You mean who am I writing about?
In the book, yeah.
Yeah. Well, basically the way the book's set up, it starts with the Kenneth Arnold sighting in 1947, which marks the. I hope I don't have to repeat that story. But anyway,
Derivative Jill says, "Yes, Cardinal Sin. Please work on that impression. That would be awesome."
I see that. Yes.
Whoa,
So
that's a
anyway,
deep cut from Jill.
so I'll go. Kenneth Arnold sighted 9 silvery objects as he was flying over
Was it
Mount
9
Rainier.
or was it 7?
It was 9.
Okay.
I'm pretty damn sure. But anyway, and it basically the press went crazy over this stuff, and it was the first time flying saucers ever got into the press like that. In any case, Kenneth Arnold ended up being the first flying saucer investigator. Ray Palmer, who was the publisher of Fate magazine, which still goes today, asked Arnold if he was interested in going to Tacoma, Washington to investigate a report about some flying saucers dumping a flying saucer, some flying donuts, essentially, one of which dumped a whole bunch of debris on Maury Island near Tacoma, Washington.
Are these the chevron shaped craft that he talked about?
They're donut shaped.
Donut shaped.
Yeah, so he went to Tacoma to investigate, and anyway, it turned. It was he was in over his head. It was most likely a hoax, and when 2 Army Air Force intelligence officers came out to help with his investigations, they had actually spoke with him before and his friend, so they were they wanted to come out and help out. They didn't think much of it. They left with a bag full of debris, which sounds to be a lot like lava and slag, lava rock and slag. And on the way back because they were going back to celebrate Air Force Day, because the Air Force had just been newly created then. Used to be the Army Air Force, then it became the Air Force. And their plane crashed. They died. So then one of the guys who was likely hoaxing the Maury Island incident called the papers and said, he knows the names of the officers who died, and they were carrying a box full of wreckage from a flying saucer. And so anyway, Arnold's investigation was very stressful, to say the least. So after Arnold, we get into the International Flying Saucer Bureau with Albert K. Bender. And Albert K. Bender, one of his befriended Gray Barker, who was one of the first people to investigate the Flatwoods Monster, along with Ivan Sanderson. So Gray Barker's introduced into the mix. Bender shut down the bureau, telling everybody he was visited by 3 men in black. So that's part of that mythos. And Barker went on. In the meantime, Coral and Jim Lorenzen opened up APRO. They had opened it up just prior to the International Flying Saucer Bureau, but International Flying Saucer Bureau actually went international first. Then APRO went international, and so they were the big fish in town. And in the meantime, James Moseley, who wrote
Saucer News.
Yes, very good. Saucer Smear,
Saucer News. First, it was Saucer News.
Yep. So yeah, Jim Moseley, he wrote a book called Confessions of a Grave Robbing Ufologist. What's amazing about that book is he was like, maybe 20 years old at that point. He was a trust fund kid with time on his hands. And I think he dropped out of school. And he hooked up with an adventurer, and the adventurer, who was a writer, Ken Kripine. So the adventurer came, he wanted to go to, I think it was Peru with him. And they made the arrangements that, Jim would pay X amount of dollars and they go to Peru. Well, this guy took advantage of Jim Moseley when he came to stay with him in Jersey. And Moseley ended up becoming his chauffeur and banker, bank loaner. So he made an arrangement that he would go for free when they went. But in the meantime, hey, let's write a book. And Jim Moseley suggested it be about flying saucers. So once he got his trip out of the way, Jim went on the road. And he ended up meeting everybody who was everybody, with nothing more than saying, I'm writing a book about flying saucers. No credentials, no nothing. He met everybody. He met Gray Barker. He met Donald Kehoe, who wrote Flying Saucers Are Real, or yes, Flying Saucers Are Real, which was the first UFO book. And he met Edward Ruppelt, who was the first head of Project Blue Book and wrote the report on unidentified flying objects. He met Al Chop, who was the Air Force spokesman during the 1952 wave over Washington, also known as the Washington merry-go-round. So basically, he met everybody. So it's a great way, going through that book, to introduce all the investigators. And then the rest of the book just follows all of them. And they come together on some cases. They fight with each other. Both APRO, later Kehoe formed the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena in 1950.
NICAP.
Yes, in 1956. They put out a publication called the UFO Investigator, which was mostly monthly. And APRO put out their publication, the APRO Bulletin. Jim Moseley put out Saucer News, first Nexus, then Saucer News.
That's
12-ish.
interesting, because there's a magazine called Nexus nowadays.
Okay. Yeah, so his first, so these people, and Bender also had, before he shut down, he had his space news. So when you read all these different publications, you see a dialogue between all of them. And they slag on each other. Jim Mosley, Cora Lorenzen was rather serious and could be a little acerbic. When Mosley and her just kind of locked horns a lot in print. Yep. So anyway, yeah, so those are basically the cast of characters. And then later in the 60s, we get to John Keel. And he befriends Gray Barker, who had gone from being a serious investigator to essentially a tabloid UFO magazine. Yes, my favorite of John Keel's. I think that's his most...
Isn't it everybody's?
No, a lot of people like The Eighth Tower.
You know, the first John Keel book I ever read was Our Haunted Planet.
Oh, yeah, that's wonderful. Yep.
And I've never read, but I'm looking forward to Strange Creatures from Time and Space.
Yeah, I haven't done that one either.
And, of course, the ubiquitous Disneyland of the Gods.
Mm-hmm.
All great works by John Keel.
You're well stocked.
Oh, that's just half of them. So, please continue.
Okay, well then after Keel, Hynek, J. Allen Hynek is also all throughout this, and J. Allen Hynek was the consultant, scientific consultant for the Air Force. He was an astronomer. He was head of the astronomy department, Northwestern, and he was a scientific consultant throughout the history of the Air Force's UFO investigation, all the way from Project Sign through the end of Blue Book to 1969. Kehoe hooks up with Jacques Vallée, and he actually got Jacques Vallée a job, I think, at Northwestern, doing, I think it was computer programming. Then James E. McDonald enters the fray. Yep. The Invisible College. And that takes us up all the way up into 1969 when they release the Condon Report. The Air Force terminates Project Blue Book, and NICAP hits the skids, and that's pretty much the end of the book.
All because Edward Condon said he wasn't supposed to come to that conclusion for another year.
Yippers.
I just want to show off the Jacques Vallée books because they are very important.
Which one is that?
This one is Revelations.
Okay. You've held up Passport to Magoni, I assume.
Mm-hmm. And we have Confrontations.
Mm-hmm.
And Dimensions, which I think kind of says it all.
Yep. So what's your favorite UFO book?
Uh-oh. I'm the one asking the questions here, Charles.
Okay.
My favorite UFO book, the one that I think I found the most compelling, to be honest, was Flying Saucer Serious Business.
Right on. Okay.
And then after that, when I got turned on to John G. Fuller, the Interrupted Journey was such a gripping book. I think I read it in 2 sittings when I was, 13 or 12 or something like that. I was a voracious reader, and for some reason, every time that my mom took me to the library, I went straight for the paranormal section. and picked up, everything from Hans Holzer and ghosts and Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster and psychic phenomena and reincarnation and, you name it, I was into it. I kind of outgrew almost all of it to a degree, except for UFOs. UFOs have always had a special place in my heart, and occasionally in the pit of my stomach.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Did one investigator in particular capture your interest, and if so, why?
I'd say they're all interesting in their own way. I like Jim Moseley's attitude. He had the most fun with it. I like John Keel's approach and the way he thought about it, and the fact that he came in as an outsider, learned real quick. He was a Fortean. For those of you who don't know, Charles Fort was a writer around the turn of the century.
And his books were Low, The Book of the Damned, and I forget the other two.
Me too. But yeah, so what he wrote about were things like, fish falls and weird animal falls, blood rains, anything weird, but things that made the papers or things that scientists actually wrote about, or
like, didn't he also write about spontaneous human combustion and things like that?
I imagine he would have. I
all
can't,
kinds of high strange.
Yeah, I did read the Book of the Damned, and that's mostly about stuff falling out of the sky, as I remember.
Yep. Frog falls and all that.
Yeah,
good stuff.
But he called it Book of the Damned. Basically, any story that science wouldn't accept, they pushed aside, so he considered it damned. So anyway, people who are interested in all this weird paranormal stuff, a lot of them call themselves Forteans, which is a broad general term.
As Stanton Friedman says, science was wrong.
Good old Stanton. Yep. So John Keel was a Fortean. He was a member of the Fortean Society here in New York as well. And he got asked to get to the bottom of the UFO mystery as an assignment for Playboy magazine. So that's what brought him out to West Virginia.
I did not know that.
Well, actually, at the time, he was looking into a story about a cat with wings named Thomas. It happened a few years earlier, but this kid found a cat he said had wings, and he charged people 10 cents to take a look at it. And
once you start charging people to look at it, that's all over.
So he was making some money, but some lady down the street said the cat was hers and took him to court. What happened is the wings fell off. They were matted hair.
He didn't sew them on?
No. It was just matted. It was a fluffy cat, so the hair matted and looked like wings.
Oy, Gavalt.
So John Keel was looking into that illustrious story for Coronet magazine. He actually talks about this in an interview with Art Bell. And then he heard a story he says during the interview with Art Bell, he heard a story over the wire about the Mothman. And he was...
this is the Point Pleasant Mothman, not the Chicago Mothman.
Correct. The original, the OM.
Yes, the original monster.
But what was cool about it is he told, Gray Barker, when he met Gray Barker, Jim Moseley had introduced them. Jim Moseley called Gray Barker and said, "Hey, there's this guy wants to meet you and look into the Mothman thing. His name's John Keel," and he made arrangements for he's going to call. So Keel calls him. They make arrangements to meet. But according to Gray Barker, Mosley told him that Keel seemed to know more about UFOs than we do. And Barker, asked him about that. He says, "You seem to know a lot that you're not telling." And he basically explained, "Well, I've read every UFO book I could get my hands on in a matter of months." And he said, "Believe me, that's tough medicine." But he learned really quick, but he came at it as an outsider. So he wasn't he wasn't, he didn't edit, he didn't compartmentalize his stories. Basically, he listened to whatever anybody told him, as opposed to only listening to people who told him things that fit in with his preconceived viewpoint. As in, all UFOs are nuts and bolts craft machines driven by aliens from another planet. A lot of researchers, if they hear something that doesn't fit in with that, they don't want to hear anymore, and they go on to the next case. Keel didn't. He listened to everything.
It's unfortunate that so many UFO investigators have what we now call confirmation bias.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so Keel didn't have that. And Keel was also open to contactee reports, which a lot of people,
dismissed.
Basically, if the occupants are okay, APRO, Coral and Jim Lorenzen were okay with occupants as long as they didn't talk. But
even telepathically.
Yeah, I think they came around to telepathically at some point, but Keel was open to contactee stories, and he ran into a doozy, which was the Woodrow Derenberger thing that happened right before the Mothman. And if you want, I'll go into that story.
Please.
Woody Derenberger.
The floor is yours.
Yeah, he was on his way home from Parkersburg to Mineral Wells, West Virginia, in a truck. He was a appliance salesman, and this vehicle went by him, and he realized it wasn't a vehicle. It was this weird thing shaped like a kerosene lantern, the glass part of a kerosene lantern. And it went past him, turned sideways, and in front of him, and he was forced to stop. He stops, door opens, guy gets out, craft goes up about 50 feet and stays there. This guy walks over to him, and the weird part, he tells him to roll down the passenger side window, and he stands next to the closed window on the driver's side. He's got a pleasant smile. A lot of people call him the grinning man. Derenberger describes him as having a very pleasant smile. So a lot of depictions of this creature show this evil-looking grin, and that's not how Derenberger described him. Anyway.
That part I actually remember.
Yeah, so Derenberger...
The rolling down of the other window and the big smile.
Yeah. So, and he said he had real shiny clothing, black, kind of I think it was like a metallic looking, a shirt with some sort of metallic looking fabric. And he said, "Don't be afraid." Telepathically, Derenberger described him that his lips didn't move, but he heard him talking. And then he realized he was being talked to telepathically. Derenberger tells this whole story, by the way. He told this whole story on live television the next day. You can actually get that audio online if you look for it. And
it's even on YouTube.
Day after this happened, he's telling this story. So the guy, he asked what all those lights over there were, pointing towards Parkersburg, and Derenberger told him, that's what we call a city. And the guy told him, where I come from, we call this gatherings. He said he was flesh and blood like he was, that his name was Cold and that he would see him again. Kraft comes down, gets back in the vehicle. He sees somebody pull him in, and off it goes. So Derenberger tells this story. And the funny thing is that there were police, 2 other people reported seeing a vehicle, seeing Derenberger. Other people reported seeing Derenberger talk to somebody as they drove by. People reported seeing the craft, and people
So
reported,
this was a multiple witness sighting.
essentially, yeah, there were sightings around it.
Yeah.
So it's all backed up. Then the story just kind of goes off the rails after that. He says he feels this intense pain in his head, and Cold makes contact. Cold tells him his name is Indrid Cold. And well, in the meantime, the public swarms on around Derenberger's farm. I think it's around his house and on his property. I don't think it was a farm. And there are people with shotguns. They're waiting to get a shot at an alien.
They're ready to defend. Yeah.
Yeah. So and just looky-loos, et cetera. But he's not, and he and his family are very polite. So he and his wife, entertain people for a while, and then it took a huge toll on the family, the kids included. His daughter actually wrote a book. Tanya Derenberger wrote a book herself about this whole period in time, and she backs up her
Charles,
father.
this reminds me a lot of the Kecksburg incident.
Okay.
The lady calls the military, the police. They show up and they use her house as kind of a forward base.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always intrigued me.
Mm-hmm. So the Derenberger case, he wrote about his experiences in I think it was The Men from Lanulos, My Trip to Lanulos.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Lanulos is in the title. I should know that. But in the book, he talks about being taken for trips in the spaceship, going to the planet Lanulos, where the people in the warm weather wear little or no clothing. So they're
It's clutch your pearls time.
space nudists.
Yeah.
He said, much like our nudists. And they never fight. They don't have any wars because they're all telepathic, which I think would cause the opposite. But so yeah, the story just goes off the rails from there. But the beginning, but in any case, Keel actually wrote the forward to that. Visitors from Lanulos. That's it.
That's it. Yeah.
Keel wrote the forward to that. He says basically, a lot of people are going to think this guy is nuts. But I listened to his story and he seems earnest, essentially, is what he said. So, Keel was willing to listen. And it's a strange story because there really seems to be something to it, at least at the very beginning, as to the space nudists and all that. And, he claimed to have gone to other planets as well, and claimed the Lanulosians, there were other ones, another one named Carl Ardo, would drive him to and from the spaceships in Volkswagens.
That's right.
So,
I forgot about that.
It's a funny story. But
well, speaking of John Keel, what do you think John Keel brought to the documentation of the UFO issue, and why is there so much high strangeness involved in his research, do you think?
He was probably because he was attracted to it. As far as
there was a certain level of
his documentation. Doug Skinner has a great site, johnkeel.com. So Doug Skinner has all his notes. Doug Skinner lives here in New York.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and he posts them. So yeah, if you get a chance, check that out. It's very cool. So what he did is he wrote essentially like field notes during his investigations, he would write notes about the people he talked to, what's going on, and you get an inside look to all the weird stuff that was going on with the contactees on Long Island during the his moth that he talks about in the Mothman prophecies. So that's pretty cool. Just because you're looking at it behind the scenes, not seeing it, in a book, which Keel was. He could elaborate a little bit. Let's just say he had
I think you used
artistic
a little artistic license.
Yes,
Yeah,
there you go.
Took
Yes.
the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah.
How do you feel books about the Men in Black have advanced the cause or slowed it down in UFO research?
Advancing the cause. I mean, they're good
Or
stories.
slowing it down,
I
depending
think
on your train of thought.
it depends on if they're documenting real cases, real reports. That's great. I'd like to see the sources. That in terms of is that a Nick Redfern?
Oh, yes.
Of course. I haven't read it, so I can't really comment on that particular one. But I'm really only interested in a story if I can see where it came from. So if you show me a source, mm-hmm.
Nick Redford comes out with a new book every second week, every fortnight.
He's a disciplined man.
He is. I think he's written about 95 books so far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's going to surpass Brad Steiger.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So let's see here. During the time that your book covers, there were several civilian UFO groups that conducted research, such as NICAP, APRO, and others, that seemed to become the focus of the military, the intelligence community, and were ultimately infiltrated by them. How did this change those groups, the investigators within them, and what do you think was the ultimate impact that this had?
Well, I think APRO, they did all right. Actually, Bill Moore was a member of APRO.
I didn't know that.
Yes. So, that ended up, APRO was actually, I think, involved with the, it wasn't Serpo. There was a document that Bill Moore got while he was a member of APRO. So APRO pretty much just touched when things got really nasty between the government and UFO groups in terms of disinformation documented, through William Doe.
Speaking of, Rick Doty.
Rick Doty, etc. But NICAP's pretty much was started by CIA people.
Yep.
There's actually a really good argument that it was set up as a front organization. They had a number of them to launder money, but NICAP didn't actually make much money at all. They were losing money hand over fist. And at the end of NICAP, they had CIA people running it when Kehoe was forced out. So that's an interesting question. I really just treat NICAP more as how they. I focus on NICAP more for their lobbying of Congress and their real investigations. I think they were affected more than anybody by government meddling. They were definitely a target.
That's fair, I think.
But to what extent? Brewer, Richard Brewer, he has a blog called On the Trail of UFOs, and he's written a book about that really covers that much better than I can hear right now. I think it's Richard Brewer. And yeah, there's a lot of talk that NICAP was a CIA front all along, but NICAP, in terms of the CIA destroying NICAP, I think they did a pretty good job on their own.
They did. Actually, that has a lot to do with one of my questions a little further down the line. But it's long been said that Project Blue Book was just a PR stunt that the Air Force put together so they could say, whatever they are, they're not a threat to national security, and eventually stop fielding civilian reports. Now, since 2017, we live in a reality in which the DoD and the ONI have admitted to Congress that they are a threat to national security. Can you walk us through how this happened, why the 180-degree flip, and how Americans should react to it?
Okay. The Air Force's UFO investigation would either be more pro-saucer, would be sometimes pro-saucer or more open-minded, and other times closed-minded, depending on who was in charge. And that goes who's in charge of the Pentagon down to who's in charge of Project Blue Book. When Edward J. Ruppelt was in charge of Project Blue Book, he was there because people running Blue Book, Project Grudge before Blue Book, got hell from the Department of Defense because they weren't taking their job seriously. And their job was to investigate unidentified flying objects, or flying saucers back then, or things invading our airspace. Ruppelt invented the term UFO or UFO. Yeah, it's actually UFO. It's not UFO.
That was Alan Hynek.
No, that's he was the Close Encounters guy.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so Ruppelt invented UFO.
And all the other countries in the world call it UFO, except for the United States.
OVNIs.
OVNI, yep.
OVNI and the soucoupe volante in France, or soucoupe cigars. Flying cigars or flying saucers.
Sometimes a flying cigar is just a flying cigar.
Yeah. So Ruppelt, when he revitalized the project, the investigation. He was charged with it. It was basically saddled with it, and he ended up stuck with it for the remainder of his service until 1953. But he did a real earnest job. He was a hard worker, and he was very open-minded. So he investigated, by God, and let the investigation lead where it may lead. And what's funny is he was the head during the Washington merry-go-round in 52. 52. And he actually wasn't able to get a car requisition so he could actually investigate, and he didn't have proper he was told that if he stayed there one day longer, he'd be AWOL because he didn't have the proper papers to be there for another day. So he said, fuck it, and went home. Excuse me. He said, screw it, and went home. Back to
no, you can say fuck it. We're not FCC.
Right on. But Ruppelt was very earnest. Guy after Ruppelt, not so much. Opposite. So he's going to debunk everything. Robert Friend, Hynek called him. Hynek praised him. He said he was the most level-headed guy there, and open-minded.
He was. I mean, I think his book shows that.
Mm-hmm. And but then Hector Quintanilla was the very last guy. He actually shows up in UFOs That Has Begun, the Rod Serling movie we talked about. So Quintanilla was very anti, and he, like, famously, the Dale Spar case where the cops chased the UFO all the way across Ohio. And he basically said, no, you chased the planet Venus. I mean, and stuck to his guns. And so
the craft that he saw was just like the state. It was round on the ends and high in the middle. Oh, high.
Yep. Yep. So, that's it. It did end up being a PR nightmare for the Air Force, and the Air Force, they had to go to Congress twice, and they finally, in 1966, they were hauled before Congress essentially, explain what they were doing. And they said a committee had recommended that they set up a scientific study. That came out. So since they said it on the public record, they were under pressure to actually do that. So they finally got the University of Colorado to agree to do a study, and that was the one headed by Dr. Condon. Essentially, do us a favor, get us out of the UFO business.
Right.
So the Condon report basically recommended that, and they were done with it. So move to today, you've got the Navy investigating UOPs, UAPs, and the Air Force is just like, good luck with that, fellas.
Yeah.
Because they've been there, and they're already dealing with it, and they're kind of backpedaling, it seems to me. And it's going to be classified. So my feeling about all that is, I think the civilian investigators have done a far more thorough job than the government investigators ever have. They've got more feet on the ground. I mean, APRO at its peak was amazing. That they had people
10,000 subscribers, or
it was international too, and
yeah.
They had people all over the place, eyes in the sky, interviewing people and
was it
sending
the
them reports.
Lorenzens that started APRO?
Yeah, Jim and Coral Lorenzen. And what's tragic is their files are being held in private hands, and they're not going to let them go, and they're not letting people see them. I forget exactly who it is, but they're not. I'm friends with David Marler, who's got the QFOS NICAP files, QFOS Center for UFO Studies. That's Jalen Hynek's group, where he made the Invisible College visible.
QFOS, yes.
Yeah, so he's got the QFOS files and the NICAP files.
I remember reading about that in your book.
He's got a lot of Project Blue Book files as well as various other investigators. And you can go and see them. And they're awesome. I actually got to hold the watercolors done by 1964 witness who was
you're not
treated
allowed
by a robot
to make copies or take them out of the room or anything like that.
You can make copies, yeah.
Oh, you can? Okay.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Good. He's actually scanning them. He's working on digitizing them.
That's great.
Yeah.
What we really need is Greg Bishop's suggestion of just putting all the databases together, never mind, the differences in humanoid encounters and types and all that. I assume you're familiar with Greg Bishop.
Yeah.
He's been on the show. He was my first guest, actually.
Oh, wow. Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
he's kind of he's not podcasting anymore, which is a drag. I enjoyed it.
I think he is. It's just after losing his wife, he's kind of taking his time getting back
I didn't know that. I'm sorry to
into
hear
that.
that.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah,
awful.
it's unfortunate, but
Yeah.
I think he'll get back to Radio Mysterioso soon enough.
Hmm.
But I've seen him on other shows, not just mine, but he's still working on things like his theory, his co-creation theory,
Hmm.
which I find very interesting because my most recent, actually, I can't say that anymore. I've had another sighting since then. The second to last most recent UFO sighting that I had, it was almost like it was a display for me alone. I was carrying groceries into the house. I had a bag in each arm. I looked up, and there I saw these two things that weren't planes, and they were moving sort of like this, like they would get within a degree of each other but not touch, and then move away, sort of like lovebirds, you
Hmm.
know. And even the Blue Angels couldn't have pulled that off. Plus, like I said, they were much, much bigger than planes. And I knew I didn't have time to set the bags down, get my iPhone out, take a photo. It was just seconds.
Yeah.
And, then they went over, behind the house. And if I'd, run to get, on the other side of the house in the backyard, I don't think I would have had any better luck. But
Well, that's cool. I've never seen anything.
really,
No, I've had psychic experiences,
hmm
but I've uh, never seen anything. Never seen a ghost. Never seen a UFO.
wow.
Yes.
Well, uh, next time you're in Kansas, look me up and we'll go to the UFO Watch Tower.
Ooh, there's a UFO Watch Tower in Kansas. I knew there was one.
In
I think in Colorado.
just outside of Lawrence, yeah, there are
Oh,
two actually. There's one that's in a county park. That's I think it used to be a forest ranger station. Uh, it goes up 4 flights of stairs, and you can see for miles in every direction. Mostly just trees. It's outside of town by I think 10, 15 miles, and yeah, Wells Overlook. I also was there uh, looking at Halley's Comet. This is dating me somewhat, in
what was that?
1986,
Yeah, it was 86. Yeah, right.
and couldn't really see anything, but I turned around and my brother was just standing right behind me, uh, which freaked me out for just a second. And then I was like, oh, that makes sense that he's here too. Because he kind of turned me on to all this stuff. So,
Oh, cool.
yeah, Hale Bopp was a much better comet. Hale Bopp was in the sky for like 6 months, as I
Hmm.
recall. And really, really great. So, Charles, we've entered the second hour, which is when we take questions from the chat. So, chat, if you have any questions for Charles, please feel free. And until then, I have a question for you. Over the years, investigators like Jacques Vallée have gone from an unearthly yet very real craft explanation into the more esoteric and then sometimes back again. Why do you think that is?
They are fluid thinkers. They don't hold on to one opinion, which is actually admirable.
It
Uh,
is.
some people are just stubborn in their belief, and that's a shame. You've closed yourself off to a lot of things.
I agree.
I myself, some days I think this is all a bunch of BS. And then other
Yeah, I
days
do
I'm
too.
like, I believe everything,
I've had experiences and sometimes I think it's all bullshit.
right on. So,
Ari asks, does Charles have any Stanton Friedman stories?
Other than the fact that Stanton Friedman, by underhanded means, according to Jim Moseley, for instance, he would basically, Jim Moseley was was a star on the lecture circuit. He was
the trickster in the UFO community.
But he was a star on the lecture circuit because I forget the incident, but he was a go-to guy for a company that this is what happened. The Detroit, I think it was the Detroit Flying Saucer Club, wanted to. No, it was an electricians group in, I think it was Detroit, wanted a speaker on UFOs. They asked Donald Kehoe. Donald Kehoe charged too much money. They asked Jim Moseley. He said, "Yeah, I'll do it," and gave him a good price, and he became the go-to guy. So Jim Moseley was the guy speaking everywhere.
I'll give you a really good price.
Yeah.
Come on.
So Friedman, essentially, according to Moseley, Friedman would call people and like underbid him or say, "No, you should have me. I'm a nuclear physicist."
Right,
so
right.
That's a Stanton Friedman story right there.
Actually, Stanton Friedman was one of the people that I brought to town to do a UFO lecture, and there used to be a show in Kansas City called the Mike Murphy Show, and they would do UFO shows every so often. And every time I brought someone to Lawrence to speak, I would have them call into the Mike Murphy Show first and talk for 45 minutes, and then spend the last 15 minutes, talking up the gig, the lecture, where it was and how to get there and who was in charge and all that kind of stuff. And I've totally forgotten why I mentioned that now.
You're just telling me you were you brought Stanton Friedman as a speaker.
Yeah.
Yes.
His lecture was 3.5 hours. I have the whole thing on videotape, and I actually put it in the Into the Fringe playlist. So anybody that's out there that would like to see a vintage 3.5 hour lecture of flying saucers are real. By Stanton Friedman.
And God bless him, he called them flying saucers.
Yeah. Yeah. And R with 27 underlines.
Right on.
Some of which, he said, are extraterrestrial craft.
Mm-hmm.
He did leave things open. Want to make sure we're checking for questions. And in the meanwhile, what sources did you use in researching your book, and what was your research process like? Can you walk us through it?
As I'm telling the story, first off, I knew the beginning of the story. I had to talk about Richard Shaver and the Shaver mystery. So I had to find out everything I could about that. And once you go to Shaver, you're there with Palmer because they were buddies, and one wouldn't exist without, Shaver wouldn't have existed without Palmer. And it's actually, there's something really touching about that because Shaver was almost definitely a paranoid schizophrenic, and because of Ray Palmer, he had a place to put it, and he ended up living a functional life and became something of a celebrity. And Ray Palmer stuck by him. So I've got to find out who Richard Shaver is. I've got to find out who Ray Palmer is. So there's a great book by Richard Toronto. There's two great books about Palmer. I only remember Richard Toronto's right now. Sorry to the other author. And that also talks about Shaver as well. And then there's also a lot of stuff about Shaver. So I look for everything I can find about Shaver. And then as I'm telling the story, I cite, this came from here, this came from here, this came from here, this came from here. And where I can, I provide the links to the website where I got it. This was mostly armchair research because
Your book is very well footnoted, I must admit.
thank you. So yeah, so that's basically the process as I'm telling the story. Okay, so now this follows this follows this. You can kind of see it as I'm going chronologically. Okay, so this year, who are the important groups? So International Flying Saucer Bureau, APRO, NICAP. Um, Same thing. I want to find the APRO bulletin and the NICAP UFO Investigator. I found where to find those. UFO Investigator, you can get at NICAP, still got a website, nicap.org. APRO.
Aren't they no more, though?
There are no more. They still got a website. Fran Ridge still runs
Is it
it.
nicap.org?
Yep. Yeah.
Wow.
And Fran Ridge is active in MUFON still.
Learn something every day, I guess.
Yep. And so the Archives for the Unexplained Sweden, type in files.afu.se and you've got all their digitized, they've got magazines from all over the world. And so that's where APRO, you can get everything top to bottom. And they're also amazing. So amazing websites. Patrick Gross, I forget what his site is called. I'm sorry, Patrick. But he looks into a case, for instance, and he's got newspaper article after newspaper article after newspaper article. Yeah, there you go.
This is really cool, Charles. I have never seen this, and I had
Oh,
no idea
yeah.
this existed.
Click on, go down a little bit. Yeah, just click on some of those folders, and I can't see it well enough from here, but they have, they have some case files, and
Oh, yeah, just a few.
yeah, which is super cool.
That is
And
super cool.
yeah,
NICAP.org, everybody. Check that out after the show.
hmm yeah, and QFOS.org, they've got a site still too.
No kidding.
Yep, and
Wow.
same thing. Their case files are awesome.
That's the organization that J. Allen Hynek started, right?
Yes.
Ufos?
Yeah, and I had QFOS investigations are really good. I like them a great deal. Uh-oh.
I must be misspelling it.
CUFOS.
Yeah, my
Maybe
internet
just
has
type
been
in
acting weird.
type in
Oh,
Q.
there it is.
There it is.
It
Yeah,
finally showed up.
yeah, and they're ancient, but they're still up. Somebody's
That's great.
Yeah, somebody's
Let's
looking
see
after
what
them.
they actually have to say here.
Do you have case files in there?
We're gonna find out.
Yeah.
About QFOs, report a sighting, classic UFO cases. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Does it have the Cisco Grove? Yeah, so there you go. So the original notes, man. The original reports.
That's really cool. Thank you, Charles.
You're welcome.
That's really cool. I had no idea that those were out there.
Yeah, so that's throughout the book. So basically anybody reading the book can go on the same journey I went, finding all this stuff.
At their leisure. Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. So Canadian Spider Man has posted, please stay until the end of the chat to partake in the giveaway. The giveaway will be an autographed copy of Charles Lear's book, The Flying Saucer Investigators. And I got a lot of questions after I'd set up the show asking me if you were related to John Lear, and I said, as far as I know, he's not.
I'm distantly related to Bill Lear, so I'm distantly related to John Lear, but not
I
close
see.
enough to have uh, received any monetary gain. I've been told. I haven't done the genealogy.
Well, once you do, you may have to come back and tell us what that's all about.
What John Lear's all about?
Well, what your family connection is.
Oh, what that is. Yes. Okay.
So, what contributions do you feel that certain investigations have made to ufology, like Stanton Friedman, for example, or some of the other investigators that you've looked into?
The only thing I'm interested in is good stories, folklore.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
when people say advancing, and it's been 75 years, are we going to find an answer? I mean, if that's what you're looking for, that's cool. As far as that goes, I mean, everybody comes at this from a different angle and enjoys it in a different way. But
Sure.
for me personally, I like the history and the stories and it's about humans for me. It's not about as far as speculating. Uh,
Occupants and abductees and all that stuff belong to somebody else, right?
well, I mean, I'll listen and I'll ponder it. It's a
Like
mystery,
once a
but
month we have Albert Rosales on, and
oh, one
he has 20,000 cases in his database,
you have him on once a
and
month. I'll have to tune
yeah,
in. I'm a big
yeah.
fan of Albert Rosales.
Oh, me too. And we spend every single episode trading off reading the best cases from that book. I think the
Mhm.
last one that we did was 1980 to 84, and we didn't even have time to talk about Bent Waters.
Well, I'm a
Um,
sucker for humanoid reports, and that's Albert's.
I remember running into his humanoid encounter database online back in, I don't know, the early aughts, and for 3 days I was just like, wow, oh my god,
Mhm.
and the classifications and everything like that,
Yeah.
a lot of fun.
Hmm.
um, so did you stumble into any areas that for some reason made you decide to back away? Did you receive any bizarre or disturbing phone calls or visits from the men in black helicopters, anything like that?
Nope.
What was
Uh,
the
the
what was the
only
biggest
I've got
roadblock?
one story of something that happened to me
Yeah.
from Big Brother. I was I got a gig to a, a friend of a friend went to Iran and got some footage. His family fled Iran when the Shah fell, and he went back and did a film where he got some pretty incendiary stuff, and he managed to get it out.
Incendiary in what way?
Oh, incendiary in terms of people actually criticizing the government uh, and the mullahs and how the
Mm-hmm.
kids had girl boy parties and did basically lived
A little
a, a
revolutionary.
secular their secular lives in the midst of all this.
Right.
And so I had a sound studio and a lot of
I saw
equipment.
that behind you. I've been a professional musician for 35 years,
Oh, right on.
so
Yeah, so
I
I
recognize that stuff.
I got the gig to we talked and he said, yeah, can you do me a score? And the score I gave him was, I'm bending violins and my synths and all that. And he said, no, that's Egyptian music. I was, oh, he basically said, what I just did was he essentially like making a Western and scoring it with banjos. So I had to learn about Iranian music really quick. So all my websites that I'm searching are Iran.com, Iranian music, all Iranian music. Iran.
Well, for sure,
So
the incident with I want to say Pervez something. I don't
mm,
remember his last name. The colonel that was sent up after a UFO near Tehran. That's a famous case.
Yes, yes. So anyway, what happened is a person who was staying at my house at the time had actually worked for the FBI. She was a former hacker who got a gig with the FBI, telling him how to deal with hackers. And she no longer worked for them. She got a phone call saying, "What is going on? Who are you staying with?" And she basically said, "Charles, what the hell are you looking for in there?" So somebody was keeping tabs on me and my Iran searches, and asked her what was going on because they knew she was staying there. So that's my big brother stories.
And you're sticking to it.
Yes, I am. But UFOs, no, I'm a nobody. I'm Martin Willis's
When did
blogger.
you first become interested in UFOs, and what led you to write the book?
I've been interested all my life. What got me to write the book was I blog weekly for Martin Willis at Podcast UFO.
Ah, I see.
And that's where I learned the research. I've been writing for him for 4 years, once a week, and I do audio blogs as well. So
Well,
Martin,
you do good work. His podcast has really taken off. He's been doing that for what, 7 years?
10. He just
10
had his
years.
10-year
Wow.
anniversary. He had the who's who of ufology there in
Oh yeah.
visit him too. So Martin,
I'm a little bit jealous because he gets a higher caliber of guests sometimes than I do. Like I haven't had Lou Elizondo on. I think he has.
Yeah. So anyway, he suggested that I've written over 150 blogs, in 4 years. No, I would be almost 200 in 4 years, 52. But yeah, so I've written about 200 blogs for him. He suggested I put them together in a book, and then I said, well, I actually had another idea. I'm interested in the flying saucer investigators themselves, and I'd like to write a book about them. And he says, well, let me hook you up with Philip Mantle. He had just gotten Philip Mantle together with Calvin Parker. Calvin Parker actually contacted Martin after a blogger before me, wrote a blog about the Pascagoula incident. Calvin wrote to Martin saying, "Hey, that was a really good blog, Calvin." And Martin said, "Is this the Calvin Parker?" Calvin Parker, and he said yes. And Martin said, "Do you want to come on my show?" So Martin became friends with Calvin Parker, Pascagoula, Mississippi fame. Hooked him up with Mantle, and Calvin Parker's book took off. And
this is the
Pasky.
sculpture of what he calls the ugly one.
Mm-hmm.
Which, when I was a kid and I saw this in a UFO book that I had to skip that page because it was terrifying.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But I didn't even know how terrifying Calvin's abduction experiences were.
Yeah, because he went into hiding. He said, "Oh, I was asleep for the whole thing. I don't know." and
yeah,
so
he let Charles Hickson get the spotlight.
Yeah,
but I remember seeing a documentary, maybe on Netflix, where somebody was driving into the Pascagoula area and was looking up, people that had seen something, like maybe had seen the saucer.
I just saw that.
Light, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really incredible because you get to see Calvin Parker standing up, talking to like this room full of, 6 or 7 people who, he said, "Thank you so much for coming forward because now I know I'm not crazy."
It's very
I don't
touching.
remember the name of the documentary. Do you?
Alien Contact, I think.
Is that it?
It? Yeah, and then there's a subtitle, the Pascagoula Incident. like alien contact, the Pascagoula incident, I think it is. Yeah, that's like, it's very touching too, and that's the whole thing that I'm interested in is the human story.
Sure.
You know, that it's like you can look at UFO porn and just, oh, wow, that's a great story. That's a great story. But sometimes you sit back and you're like, wow, these people were just really messed up. Or some of them, it was really, positive experience, but some people just got really messed up by this
Paul
stuff.
Benowitz, you're definitely at the other side of
Yeah,
that scale.
or Dale Sparr, he ended up losing his family.
Before, Captain Thomas Mantell.
Well, he pretty much, I'm pretty convinced he was chasing a skyhook weather balloon and blacked out from lack of oxygen.
Well, he eventually crashed into a mountain, so.
Yeah, that'll kill you.
Between all the years, cases, congressional hearings, investigative groups, both governmental and civilian, how did you organize your research to keep writing? Where did you start, and were you surprised at where it took you?
I organized it's chronologically, and the story seemed to tell itself. And anytime I would worry about, I got to get James McDonald in there somewhere, and all of a sudden he starts showing up in the APRO bulletins that I'm reading, and I went through the APRO. I believe I've read every APRO bulletin from 1954 to 1988, as well as the UFO Investigator until they shut down.
That's a lot of reading.
More likely, I skimmed a lot of them, but yeah, I've gone through all of them, and as you go, basically they were an anchor. Because all of a sudden these people start showing up, and there's James McDonald all of a sudden, and
Dr. James McDonald.
I think around 1967 he just comes into the fray, and I got to go read Ann Druffel's book now. So basically a character will come in, and then I've got to find out everything I can about that character, and there are books out there like Ann Druffel's book, Firestorm, which is really, really good. In terms of the information she got, she was given cooperation by McDonald's family. She had he kept notebooks, like he would keep them in his pocket. She had those little notes he wrote to himself. So that book is definitely a must read for anybody interested in McDonald. But yeah, so that's basically the way it went. The characters would come up. I've got to find out about them. So that's where the research takes me. And yeah, the story pretty much came to me that way. So,
absolutely. Do you have a favorite case? And if so, why?
That changes. I really like the Cisco Grove case.
What's that?
A bow hunter. His name escapes me at the moment. It was getting dark. He was he was really far away from camp, and he realized he wasn't going to make it back. So this is 1964, and he's dressed in camouflage over his regular clothes. So he climbs up a tree, belts himself in, and as he's sitting there in the tree, he sees this light. He thinks it's a helicopter. And then he's thinking maybe it's not a helicopter. There's something weird looking about it. And he saw these square windows and this kind of round shape behind it.
So is he like in a deer stand?
No, he climbed the tree and tied himself in with a belt.
Why?
So he wouldn't fall out, so he could sleep.
Well, yeah, but why did he decide to sleep in a tree?
So he passing mountain lions and bears, even though they can climb trees,
I see. Okay.
Would be less likely to eat him.
Sure.
So out of the brush come these two humanoids. They're wearing like these white sort of fabric looking spacesuit like things that have puffy arms and puffy knees. Their eyes he described as black, like welder's goggles, and along with them is a little robot looking creature with a square head and a jaw.
Do these creatures resemble the Michelin Man at all?
No, they don't. There's another case from France that's like that.
Okay.
But yeah, so these things had them treed, and they're shaking the tree, trying to get them down, and the robot's releasing vapor, and that causes them to pass out. He starts burning his clothes and throwing him down. He shot an arrow at the robot. It bounced off, knocked the robot back. Another robot
danger.
And yeah, so he burned all his, all his clothes except for his pants and T-shirt, and every piece of paper that he had, because it seemed to like keep them at bay. The robots released gas. He went out and then woke up the next morning and made it back to camp, and they fed him some soup. He slept, and that's the story.
That's right. I forgot about that.
And you can find that in the Ufos files. That's Cisco Grove, California.
Ari says it was September 4th of 1964, and 28-year-old Donald Shrum and a group of friends were bow and arrow hunting at Cisco Grove in Placer County, California.
That was Donald Shrum. Okay, I mix up Donald Shrum with another case where a guy shooting at an elk, his bullet stopped in the middle of the air, and he was taken aboard a spaceship by a space alien along with the elk he was shooting at. Anyway.
Massive mutilation fear, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, looks like we have gotten all the questions from the chat so far. Charles, the paranormal, not just flying saucers, but poltergeists, Bigfoot, fairy lore, and Native American and First Nations peoples' traditions all seem to be connected if you investigate below the surface. Do you think that UFOs are nuts and bolts craft from somewhere else in our universe, or are they perhaps interdimensional?
I think both.
Both.
Mm-hmm. I have a fun speculation about interdimensionals.
Please. Yeah.
Well, a lot of reports, these creatures seem like confused or degenerate, and I'm imagining a planet where artificial intelligence is basically taken over and sorry about the mic, and controls everything.
Here, when that happens, we say bloody microphone.
Yeah. Okay. So I imagine in that situation, evolution is no longer selecting. There's no longer selection for intelligence. So
right.
People, whatever creatures.
That's why I'm into Devo. Devo is my favorite band.
Yes.
De-evolution.
Yes. So
it's very real.
So these creatures that created the AI have devolved after they've created portholes and flying saucers and all these things. So these poor degenerate creatures, I imagine them stumbling into Stargate, stumbling into UFOs, and sometimes landing here on Earth, getting out confused, and then stumbling back into something that gets them back or sends them off to another planet.
Maybe it's like alien drunk driving.
Right? Exactly.
I don't know.
Yeah, Bigfoot's just a drunk, stupid alien that stumbled into a wormhole.
You know, it's funny. I don't know if you're familiar with Joshua Cutchin and Timothy Renner.
Yeah.
I had them on the show a couple of times, and it was for their book Where the Footprints End, which is about paranormal Bigfoot. And the title comes from a case where there's virgin snow over an acre or so. And the rancher or farmer or whoever it is takes the investigator in to have a look, and there's one Bigfoot track or what do you call it, a
Footprint.
yeah, and that's it. It's almost like something lowered this creature down so that it could make one footprint, and that's it. That was all there was. And a lot of UFO investigators say, "Hey, keep your Bigfoot out of my UFOs." And the Bigfoot researchers say, "Keep your UFOs out of my Bigfoot." And inevitably, they almost always coincide. Timothy Renner said, in Pennsylvania, which I guess is like the, state where all the bizarre stuff happens.
Chestnut Ridge.
He said, find me a Bigfoot sighting and I will find you a UFO sighting within a week and within 10 miles. And he was quite serious.
Yeah. Have you ever had Stan Gordon on your show?
I am going to soon, actually.
Right. That's Stan Gordon's specialty. He works the Chestnut Ridge, for those listeners who don't know, and he's a big. That's what he reports is. I get UFO reports and I get Bigfoot reports. Same area.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, he's definitely going to be on in the future. I've asked him.
I think he's semi-retired. He's getting old and tired, I think. But
yeah, but he's really still interested in doing shows and things like that.
And he's done the amount of work that guy's done. It's
I know.
He's somebody I have a lot of respect for, because from the get-go, he's been really earnest, and he sticks up. This is the report, and he doesn't say, try to convince you.
Speculation.
Yeah, and he doesn't try and convince you to believe. He just says, "This is what they told me."
Yeah, and I think he was the guy that released the book about UFO sightings and Bigfoot sightings at the same time, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Have you seen the Seth Breedlove Invasion of Chestnut Ridge? I think it's one of the first movies he did. It's a really good one.
The name rings a bell, but I don't know that I have. Where is that available?
You can find that on Tubi now. I think a lot of Small Town Monsters.
So it's probably on Amazon Prime as well.
Yeah, and the music is just like music's pretty damn cool in that one. Actually, the music in all his videos is really good. Shout out to Seth Breedlove's composer.
So, what is your opinion of the work of abduction researchers like John Mack, Bud Hopkins, Dr. David Jacobs, and how do you feel it contributes to the larger body of work? I mean, you say you like the human stories. There are an awful lot of human stories.
Yeah,
in this.
They documented a lot, and I think John Mack was the most disciplined in terms of not speculating. Bud Hopkins was pretty good, but sometimes his research was a little sloppy. The story on the Brooklyn Bridge case is a really good example. Look into that. Don't take my word for it, but there's some pretty convoluted soap opera stories.
It's a little wild. It's a little wild.
Yeah, but
unfortunately, John Mack was killed in a traffic accident, I think, before he really reached his prime.
Yeah, I think he would have kind of come down to it, because he's doing some amazing work, and also the work he did in Rua at the Ariel School. Have you seen that documentary, by the way?
Yeah, it's very convincing. I mean, these kids that 20 years later have not changed their story. It was a mass sighting, and he interviewed them when they were very young. I mean, right after this incident happened was it Zimbabwe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was tearing up during the what's this is killing me. Richard, the guy who just made the documentary on the aerial phenomenon.
Is it James Fox?
No, 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 no. It was after.
The only Richard I can think of is Dolan.
Hmm. Uh, do me a favor and search it.
Sure.
Aerial phenomenon or Ariel, the movie. It's a documentary. It's just came out. He spent 14 years making it, and I'm
Oh,
ashamed that I
wow.
forgot his name. Yeah, he was originally brought in by. Uh, I think he was brought in by Mac to help document it.
Aerial phenomenon UFO documentary Talking Strange. Oh, wait. This is a YouTube video. I can't
Hmm.
show that because I'll get in trouble. Let's try something else.
Randall Nickerson, got it. I knew it would come to me. Randy Nickerson. But yeah, he's just put it out, and it's
Randy Nicholson, like Jack
Nickerson.
Nickerson.
Randall Nickerson.
Nick?
Yes, I believe so.
Let's take a look. Okay, same thing. YouTube, Amazon. We'll try that. Maybe that'll give us a better result. And it wants me to sign in. And it wants two-step verification, for crying out loud. Don't share it with anyone. Okay. Whoops.
So yeah, the documentary it's really moving. I teared up a few times, and others have said the same. It's really emotional, and it's an amazing case.
Sorry, for some reason my computer is not complying. You have 10 seconds to comply. Okay, I got it wrong again. Let's see if that does it. Amazon Music? No, I don't want Amazon Music. You're out of your freaking mind, you are. Why is this Amazon Music? Was there music related to the documentary?
Don't know.
Randy Nickerson. Nickerson. I'm going to let one of my mods look that up so we can continue our conversation.
That sounds like an idea.
That's what the mods are here for. We have some more comments. And other than Soylent Green as people, they don't seem to be terribly pertinent. Sometimes the chat just goes off in its own little thing. I do want to ask you another couple of questions before we have to spin the wheel. What made you decide to focus on the investigators of flying saucers rather than the data?
It's John, the Mothman prophecies. I want to know who the hell these guys, Gray Barker, Jim Mosley, and Ivan T. Sanderson were, especially Jim Mosley and Gray Barker, because I love the way they messed with John Keel. And then, so in the course of this, I found out who they were in great detail. I kind of knew, a bit about them before. And yeah, it's a fun story.
And we've just put up the link if you want to enter the giveaway to win an autographed copy of The Flying Saucer Investigators. The URL is on the screen, so you can do that. Cam's Crash Courses has said, we are going to parachute from a helo onto the plain of Giza for our pyramid adventure.
Very cool.
That sounds dangerous. I don't think I would want to land on the Great Pyramid of Giza. When you hit the ground after a parachute jump, you're going about 30 miles an hour. So I do not recommend landing on the Great Pyramid of Giza. Let me ask you this, Charles. What is your favorite UFO movie or TV show? Fictional, nonfiction, whatever.
UFOs, it has begun. Like I said, I'm a big fan of Seth Breedlove's work. Mothman Behind the Red Eyes, that's a big favorite.
Oh, that's I haven't actually heard of that.
Oh, that's a good one. It's long.
And what's it called again?
Mothman Behind the Red Eyes.
And that's obviously available on Amazon Prime and that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I'm finding a whole ton of stuff on Tubi. Tubi.com, TubiTV.com, whatever. But yeah, they just have a plethora of UFO stuff.
And Peter Graves says https://aerialphenomenon.com.
There it is. Thank you, Peter Graves. You're not the Peter Graves, are you? I'm a big fan.
He's not Peter Graves from
Biography.
Yes, and from the movie with the aliens with the ping pong ball eyes.
I
forget what that's called.
Invaders from Mars? No.
Yeah, something
Invaders
like
from Mars? Yeah, I love that one. It conquered the world, dude.
But the interesting thing about that film is it had a full abduction experience, including a medical examination.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me wonder, a chicken or the egg question. Did somebody see that film and then it became, the cultural zeitgeist that it is now with the Greys? Or did somebody have one of these encounters as a screenwriter or a producer or whoever and then made it into a film?
Or did making the film do something to the consciousness that coexists with us and
Very good point.
Created it?
And Pat S. says, I think that Peter Graves passed, the one whose movie was on MST3K.
Yes, I think a few of his movies on our MST3K.
I'm a huge MST3K fan.
And me
Peter
as
Graves
well.
says, I am not dead.
Very good. Peter lives.
Nice work, Peter Graves. All right, so it's time to bring in a mod with the wheel that this has been the giveaway URL for. So I think that was at 8:46. It's now 8:49, so you have 1 minute to use this URL to get onto the wheel, and then we're going to spin the wheel. I have to say, Charles, this has gone by so quickly. We're having fun.
Yeah, definitely. I live in isolation in UFO world. I don't have people to talk to whose eyes don't glaze over within the first 10 minutes. So it's been a pleasure.
I certainly hope you'll come back, and thank you so much. And to everyone that was in the chat, and of course my wonderful mods, without whom we would not be able to pull off such a slick show as Into the Fringe. Don't forget to be here in an hour when we find out who the winners are to the Rocket to Monetization contest are. We'll have 7 lucky winners, and next week our guest will be investigator, science communicator, podcast author, and fan favorite Micah Hanks.
Oh, wow.
So don't miss that show, and set your calendars. Please hit that like button if you enjoyed the content, subscribe, and maybe turn a friend or two onto the Cardinal Sin channel to help us grow and bring our content to more people out there. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and end that URL there, and we'll see Anti-Derivative Jill has said the giveaway is officially closed. So now I'm just waiting for a mod to come in so we can spin that wheel. And look who's here, ladies and gentlemen. It is Canadian Spider-Man.
Hello. Hi. Yeah,
And the crowd goes wild. How are you doing,
being
my
with
friend?
us, Charles.
How are you?
I'm doing good.
I'm really well.
You.
Oh, yeah, I'm well. I'm glad you're here. It was good to have you here.
I bet you're disguising yourself with a really cool T-shirt, aren't you?
I am. I'm wearing my Cardinal Sin moderator T-shirt as we speak.
Well, if you're not too shy, can we have a look?
No, that is not possible currently. But I will be on again, and we can definitely do that.
Okay, sounds good. I know you showed it before, so.
I certainly have.
Ari says, great show tonight. Thanks, Charles.
Thank you, Ari.
Pat says, great show, guys.
Yay.
And
Thanks.
Canadian Spider Man, I presume you have a wheel ready to go.
I do indeed. I will share the screen with you right now.
Excellent.
And I can't take credit. It was actually Anti-Derivative Jill that got the wheel ready.
Anti-Derivative Jill. She was the very first mod.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
And I'll tell you, Charles, one of the things that I hate the most about this wheel is I see my face going around and it makes me nauseous. Canadian Spider-Man.
You never played in a washing machine?
It's a bit like that.
I do.
Okay.
Yes,
well,
affirmative.
Whenever
I do
you're
have
ready,
the sound.
Let's give that sucker a spin.
All right. You're tired of seeing your head go around, I bet.
I am.
We have a full wheel. All right, let's go.
Don McDouglas.
Nice.
Congratulations. Don McDouglas
Excellent.
is one of those people that just wins all the time. It's almost like he's cheating, except, of course, there's no way to do that. So congratulations to Don McDouglas. And even though he knows the drill, I'm going to go ahead and do it again. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Because I'm a privacy freak and I have a horrible memory, I just ask people to send me their information to my email address, which is gil@sunflower.com. Charles, I was an early adopter, so Don insists I didn't hack the wheel. And lots of congratulations. So, very nice. We will definitely get that information to you, Charles, so that you can sign that and get that book out to Don. And Don says thank you.
You're welcome, Don. Thank you.
It's a very,
congratulations to
Oh,
Don.
there you go.
well, there we go. Hey, look at that. Cardinal Sin's Mod Squad. And I bet
pretty
it says
slick
something on the
t-shirts.
back, too.
There is.
Are
There
you
is something on the back.
road crew T-shirts?
These are shirts that only my mods get to wear.
Yes.
You can't really see it from that perspective,
no.
but can you like squat down?
Yeah, no, it's not working today, Cardinal Sin. Sorry about
Okay,
that.
that's
But,
all right.
Yeah, I wasn't. Yeah, not just got home. I haven't even eaten. I haven't even. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, yeah,
Well,
I know I'm starving.
Thanks for being here and doing what you do.
I couldn't miss
It's
it.
very important, and like I said, it's keeping the show, slick. And without my mods, I don't know what I would do. I would be tearing what's left of my hair out.
You have a good team.
So, Charles, you have never had a UFO encounter, seen anything, never had any weird clicks or buzzes or computerized voices on your phone, no visits from the Men in Black, nothing like that, right?
Right.
So the next book is the one that's going to bring undue attention, probably. What's next for Charles Lear?
Part 2. I'm gonna.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I want to do from 1970 up until Bill Moore's speech at the MUFON convention.
Which was,
which was
2019?
1989.
Oh, 1980. Oh, okay. Yeah. And so then after that, you'll have to do a third one.
Ufology just got freaking weird after that, or around that time. I
That's
really
true.
was not happy.
That's very true.
But there are still some cool cases coming out, though. When I was in New Mexico, a couple of guys saw something they described. They thought it was a circus tent or a tent for a movie shoot.
Oh,
and weird creatures that made the papers. There's still weird stuff being reported, and that was in the papers, and they stuck to the story.
Well, Albert Rosales comes on once a month, and we read out the highest strangeness cases that he has. His publisher has made him remove that 20,000 cases database offline. He still has it. He adds to it and corrects it daily. But now he's published 16 books, and it goes every 5 years, because any more than that would be huge. And it starts at, I think, 1 AD and goes up to, I don't know, like 1500 or something like that. And eventually it enters, the modern era, and then he just does 5 years, 5 years, 5 years. And he said he's retiring, but he's got one more book in him, and we're actually writing a book together with Walter Bosley. So
very cool.
that's going to be
nice.
That's going to be a lot of fun.
Walter's a good friend of the channel. All right. Well, thank you. It was very nice meeting you, Charles Lear. Thank you for being on.
My pleasure. It's been fun.
Thank you, Cardinal.
Absolutely. And I hope that we can coax you back. And that'll do it for this episode of Into the Fringe. I'd like to thank Charles Lear for being here. All the mods, everyone that's been in the chat, thank you very much. And it is Cardinal Sin out.